Greetings, listeners. Howard and I spoke with a very special guest. He is the managing partner of a 137-year-old New York AM law firm that's betting big on AI while staying fiercely independent. Our guest breaks down why armies of lawyers are becoming obsolete, how AI is reshaping training, strategy, and client work, and why he believes the future belongs to independent firms with sharp judgment, not just massive scale. Enjoy. So welcome everyone to the Future is Bright podcast. My name is Chris Batz and joined by my co-host Howard Rosenberg. Howard and I are at the very center of law firm talent and strategic growth here in New York City. Howard is a partner and head of talent intelligence and acquisitions at Barretts and Brunel, and I advise and facilitate law firm mergers and PE investments in law firms at Columbus Street. And today we have a very exciting guest, Robb Patryk, managing partner of Hughes Hubbard and Reed. Robb, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Howard and Chris.
Great. So, Robb, if you wouldn't mind, please provide our audience a quick overview of Hughes Hubbard and Reed and your role there today.
Certainly. So Hughes Hubbard is a 137-year-old law firm headquartered in New York City and started by Chief Justice Charles Evans Hughes. I'm the managing partner. I've been here 37 of the 137 years. I joined right out of NYU Law School.
Excellent. And approximately, talk to us a little bit about headcount, because I think you guys have uniqueness in headcount, including being an AM law firm.
Sure. So we're a little over 200 lawyers, a little over 60 partners. We've been essentially that size for quite some time. It's a deliberate strategy of ours to be this size. We're an independent firm. We do have a few offices outside the United States, one in Paris, one in Tokyo, but largely we operate with other independent firms around the world rather than having, 1,000 lawyers across the universe.
Yeah. Robb, can we jump in and can you talk to us out of the gate about your new signed deal with August AI? What is it? What are you guys wanting to achieve? And most particularly, how do you view the future with AI?
Sure. So like many law firms, we've been, looking at various AI providers. As you guys probably know, there are a million different companies out there offering different types of services. We were really looking for one provider that could help us in each of our practice areas, both on the legal side and on the business side, with AI. And after beta testing various others, we landed with August, which is a relatively new company, but really could help us across our platform, not just our practice areas, but again, the business side of the firm. So really what we were looking for was, rather than the patchwork quilt that we also considered, honestly, because there are some great products out there, but they're very targeted on individual practices. And what we wanted was something that the entire firm could work with and that we could get comfortable with in August is really what we settled upon. The reason we embraced August and we're embracing AI is the future is now. I mean, anyone that is using AI, and I've been using it personally since it started, experimenting with it, watching it develop. The developments from 2022, when I first got ChatGPT on my phone, the free version of it, to now are extraordinary. The quality of the answers, what it enables you to do, the speed with which it enables you to get answers to questions, to come up with strategy, and it helps with everything. There's nothing in my life I'm not using AI with, either personally or professionally. I mean, it is that helpful, and it's only getting better. And I look to the future, and we as a firm have been looking at the future and realize it is going to significantly impact the way we practice law. It already has, and it's only going to get better. So to me, it is something that enables us to really remain very much who we are, an independent law firm that punches above its weight. And now we don't need an army of people in order to punch. And so AI is really an incredible tool for a firm like ours.
So, Robb, on that point, can you talk to the audience about, you're saying that you're kind of living in the future a little bit with the AI. How do you see this thing kind of unfolding in the next couple of years?
So it's interesting. I mean, I don't think any of us know exactly, because the advances in AI have been so rapid that what I know about the product today will be completely untrue probably 2 years from now in terms of what it can deliver. But already it's an incredible time saver. in everything that a lawyer or a partner, an associate in a law firm does. I mean, even something like Copilot, which is one of the early things that everyone got if you've got Microsoft as part of your platform, its ability to summarize, its ability to pull out relevant information, its ability to help you respond to emails, to ferret through emails, even that type of thing is an incredible time saver, enabling us to do more interesting work than fishing around for emails or figuring out how to respond to something. And so, where it will be from a drafting perspective, I've already seen kind of what August can do and others. From a research perspective, from a business development perspective, one great example is, let's say you've got a target, a client that you're chasing for some particular reason. AI is a great tool in helping you frame your approach to that particular target. And it's incredibly fast, and it's only going to get faster. And so it just enables you to do more of what you do much quicker. And, the impact
So,
will be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
so let me ask a follow-up question to that, because if you are kind of living in the future and you have this amazing technology and the technology is only getting better, clients are getting access to the same technology that you have. Where does this end? Like, what's going to happen to the shape and nature of your firm when you have this kind of amazing technology deployed?
I mean, I think that's a good question for the entire industry. I think where it will lead is, look, lawyers are hired for their judgment and bringing their judgment to a set of facts, a set of circumstances, and advising clients. Ultimately, that's what we do. And what AI is doing is enabling us to get to that place quicker. So AI is not in a position where it can tell you what the best option is among the various options that it collects. And I don't think it will ever get there. But it is getting much quicker at getting us the information that I need as a counselor to give advice to a client. And so I think it just means, I think implicit in your question is, are there some questions we're not getting now from clients because they can go to AI? I don't know that for certain, but I'm guessing that's the case because AI is terrific at answering some basic questions. And it will result, no doubt, in the commoditization of certain types of work that AI will be able to do as well as, or at least good enough. It'll be good enough for particular types of answers. But that's not the kind of work my firm wants to do anyway. I don't want commoditized work. We want to work on clients' most interesting and tough questions. And that requires a lawyer with judgment and experience to answer those questions. And aided by AI, from my perspective, we'll just give better answers.
Yep. Rob, let's pivot to, and you bring up the word strategy before. I'd love to hear what Hughes Hubbard and Reed is thinking about and how you guys are processing strategy today and into the future.
So, as I talked about earlier, we've been an independent firm for 137 years. I have a partnership that very much wants to stay that way. And tools like AI make it easier for us to stay that way. Because what AI does, as I mentioned, is remove the necessity for armies. And so we are big enough to take on clients' most sophisticated problems at our size now. And so we like that. And the plan is to stay that way. One of the things we've been doing in the 2 years that I've been managing partner, along with Neil Oxford, who's our new chair, is attempting to rebalance the firm's practices. Hughes Hubbard, from its inception, Charles Evans Hughes was a litigator. The firm has been, litigation balanced more in favor of litigation its entire history. Entire time I've been here, we've been 60 to 70% litigation. We're trying to balance that by having more finance and M&A practice for a lot of different reasons. A, my partners love that type of work. B, it is much more predictable from a budgeting perspective and a strategic perspective in terms of if you have a finance client or an M&A client, they tend to be repeat clients. You can have a litigation client where you do a case for them for 10 years and they may not have another significant litigation for another 15 years. And so having a greater base of corporate and finance clients, I think is healthier for the firm. So we of course are looking at strategic acquisitions of litigators. We just brought on a boutique in our DC office to beef up our litigation capabilities there. But in addition to building on our traditional strengths, we're looking to rebalance a bit more so that we've got more finance and M&A in the firm. And we've had some success in doing that. We brought in 3 lateral finance partners last year, continuing to look at both finance and M&A. It's been a real focus of our lateral efforts recently.
So Rob, as the technology advances, I was just wondering what your talent strategy for younger people coming into the business is like.
So I think at this point, our strategy remains the same. What will change over time as we get more and more comfortable with AI doing certain tasks is how to replace the training that people got by doing things. So, for example, back in the day, I used to open a box of documents, review them, summarize them, pull out the most important document. I would get a deposition transcript and summarize it for the partner on the case. That was useful training in terms of learning what's important, what facts are important, what aren't. Figuring out how we're going to do that if some of that work is now going to be done by AI will be a bit of a challenge. I think what's going to result is there's going to be more mentoring. There will be more time spent by people like myself with junior associates, showing them those things verbally, as opposed to them, sitting for hours in a dusty warehouse in Cleveland looking at documents. And honestly, the way that I was trained is not necessarily the best way. I think junior associates will benefit from AI because I think it means that the scut work that I did learn from at the time, they won't have to do. Sitting in front of, even sitting in front of a computer screen, sorting documents and that type of thing that 2 years ago associates were still doing. I think it's a benefit to them. So by and large, I think it means more partner and senior associate time with junior associates to train them, more hands-on than what we do now. So it's more of an investment of my time. But honestly, I like working with our associates, so it's not really an issue. But I think it means we're going to have to be more careful and deliberate about how we train associates.
Yeah. I mean, and that's encouraging, Rob, that we're talking about actual relationship versus grunt work that the associates had to do. That there's a move back to traditional apprenticeship and relationship. That sounds like a benefit, a win because of technology. Rob, let me ask the crystal ball question. And I welcome your unique insights. 10 years from now, what does a law firm actually look like? Is it recognizable from where we sit today? And I appreciate your candor.
That's a really tough one. I think the chasing of scale that you see now through merger activity, through enormous acquisitions of boutiques and so forth, I think it will cease because that model should be upended by AI. I could be wrong. It's hard to predict 10 years into the future, but needing an army is just not necessary anymore. I think what's going to become more and more important to clients, because they're going to have the same access to AI that we have, is the type of judgment that senior and skilled lawyers bring to a situation. And you don't need a million people in order to do that. You need the right people in your law firm in order to do that. So, it's very interesting what's going on now. English firms acquiring American firms combining, particularly in the AmLaw 200, or being acquired by firms in the AmLaw 100. But that type of scale, I just don't see it being where we are 10 years from now. But, your guess is as good as mine.
Rob, what keeps you up at night?
Oh boy. Well, some of the issues we've already talked about. I mean, the implementation, like we just got August on board, right? We're just starting to use it across the firm. Getting all of our lawyers to embrace AI is a challenge. It's very interesting to me. I would have expected that younger lawyers, junior associates, would immediately be all over AI because they grew up with technology and are accustomed to it. That isn't necessarily the case. There are some skeptics about AI for various reasons, what I'll call political reasons about the amount of energy that AI uses and so forth. The younger generation is not consistent in its view that AI is a good or bad thing. And so, getting everyone, including, more senior partners that maybe haven't experimented with it yet, to get comfortable with it is one of the things I think all law firms, not just my own, worry about it. I'm not a tech person, but I experimented with AI at the beginning because a friend suggested that I give it a try, and I was amazed, even in 2022, what it could do. And so I stayed with it. But that's really not the case with everybody. A lot of people resisted it. And so we've got to get past that initial resistance at first. And then the other issue that you've mentioned, which is, clients have access to the same technology. What is that going to mean in terms of the workflow? How much work will we not get because of access to AI? And so those are things that, and the latter is not something that I can know. You don't know what phone calls you don't get, right? And so, but I do sense that it will result in less of the commoditized work, which is, a blessing as far as I'm concerned. We're not chasing commoditized work anyway. And to the extent that AI commoditizes work, that therefore, corporations no longer need to call outside counsel, that's okay. Because as lawyers, we're interested in the interesting work. So.
Rob, we haven't talked about two other unique dynamics in the market. That is private equity and then non-attorney ownership of law firms and the entrance that could come into play. I'd love your thoughts on that.
So it's interesting, every day it seems there's an article written about that very topic. AI and private equity investment in law firms are the two biggest topics in the industry right now. And, I read them all. It's interesting, with the exception of, I guess, Arizona and Utah, is it, that's been considering changing the rules. Investment by non-lawyers in firms is prohibited under Rule 5.4. We all know that. You've got the MSO example or workaround that probably started in the accounting industry and is now potentially bleeding into law that firms are considering. I see a tension at this point between what I'll call the culture of private equity and the culture of law firms. At my firm in particular, I keep talking about our pride in being independent. The idea that a non-lawyer would own some or part of our business, I think, is just something that our partnership would really struggle with. And, we have access to capital now. I don't need private equity if Hughes Hubbard needs capital. I really see private equity potentially as a solution for law firms that are struggling and that need to make some dramatic investment in order to stay in the game. I'm in the game. And so I don't need a private equity firm to come in and pump capital into us in order to be who we are. And so, and that's, the MLaw 50 or 100. I mean, I think McDermott or a firm like that had mentioned they were considering this. It was in one of the 100 articles that have come out in the last couple of weeks about this topic. And I'd be surprised if ultimately they do it. Given the ethical restraints on doing it, I'm not quite sure we're at a point yet where it's possible, other than potentially through an MSO. But unless you're a firm that really needs capital, you've lost a significant number of rainmakers, or there's some hit to your business where that's the only solution. That could be the first firm or firms that ultimately end up doing it. But to me, I understand the private equity field. We have private equity clients, of course, but it's a different mindset in terms of how they think about business and the way we think about business. Hughes Hubbard's a 137-year-old firm. We are very long-term in the way that we think. Private equity is a shorter-term mindset in terms of revenue and the other things that come into consideration when you're making a private equity investment. It's a different business. So merging those two businesses and cultures, I think, is probably the biggest challenge.
Rob, being that you're a managing partner, there's an emergence of CEOs and titles of CEOs in law firms. How do you look at your role? I believe you still practice law, correct?
I still
do
do practice
that
law.
within management of the firm?
So it's interesting. So we have had a chair and a managing partner the entire time that I've been here. At one point, so my predecessor's managing partner was also the chair. He had stopped practicing when he took over the two roles. when he retired, our executive committee decided to separate the roles again. They had been separate, and have two people that were still practicing be in those roles. I wasn't part of that decision. I was a result of it. But I believe the philosophy behind that was that a managing partner and a chair who are still practicing can relate better to the partnership because they've got the same concerns, right? We have to bring in clients. We've got to bill those clients. We've got to keep them happy. And so can relate more with the day to day of the partnership. And so, it is a challenge at times to balance those two. But I think it really personally really helps me as managing partner to still be doing those things. Because when a partner comes to me and has a concern about their business development efforts or hanging on to a particular client or what we should be billing a particular client in terms or charging them on fees, I can relate to all of those things because I'm experiencing it myself on a personal level. Um, we also have professionals at the C-suite. We have a chief operating officer, Gerard Cruz. We've had him for 14 years. And that's terrific because when I stepped into this role, Gerard was still there from the previous management of the firm to kind of help me and Neil through this process. And, we had our training wheels on when we came in. We spent time with Ted Meyer, the previous chair and managing partner. But, then suddenly you're thrown into the lake and you have to start swimming. So we have, a chief technology officer. We've got Gerard, who's the COO, you know, uh, chief human resources officer, et cetera. So we have, Hughes Hubbard some years ago adopted, what I'll call the business model or corporate model of having, various people in the C-suite. So we're very comfortable with that. And, that's one of the reasons why I can still practice, honestly, because if we didn't have that structure, it would be very hard.
And Rob, what was the driving force to go to law school and practice as an attorney?
Oh boy. That's an interesting question. Well, I started when I went to college. I thought I was going to be an engineer, like my dad, and but did upper level math and physics got away from me, so I became a history major. And what do history majors do in the 1980s? They usually go to law school. So I in to be somewhat more serious, I always had an interest in argument and problem solving, and I thought that the law was someplace that I could do that, and so went to law school with that in mind. Was a summer associate at Hughes Hubbard back in the late 80s, and really, really enjoyed being here, and saw litigation as a path for me to do the things that I like to do, which is to strategize for clients, and then present their cases orally in front of judges and juries when the opportunity presents itself. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen as often as it used to. You've probably heard about the great dying civil litigation trial, but there aren't that many cases that go to trial. So it's kind of a blessing when that happens when you're someone in my position, because that's really why we went into this, to make arguments and present cases to juries.
Yeah. Rob, we have a large audience of law firm managing partners and chairmen, and I would love for you to have a chance to provide advice to those who want to be fiercely independent like you. So they're faced with all these market forces that are taking place today. And some of them are in the role, some of them are trying to figure out how to pass the baton. What advice would you give to them?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is be active in the IBA, the International Bar Association. If you want to be fiercely independent and you want to do the type of work that Hughes Hubbard does, which is cross-border, and you don't have offices all over the world, you need to have relationships with the premier firms around the world. And I would have to say that our work in the IBA, our attendance at the annual conferences, my partners that are quite active in that, have helped us establish the type of relationships we need to do cross-border M&A, for example, where the deal doesn't even touch America. We're just working on it because of our expertise, and we're working with firms around the world who we partner with in order to get those deals done. And so part of being independent is having people you can lean on in other law firms when you're trying to do cross-border work. If you just want to do work in the United States, which of course is the number one legal market in the world, that's great. My firm and my partners really like the cross-border aspect of both our our disputes practice and our corporate practice. So you have to have those relationships. The second thing I would point to is you've got to have buy-in from the partnership. That's easy at Hughes Hubbard. We've been independent the entire time. And people come here because that's what they want. We're smaller, so we have fewer conflicts, which is something that people struggle with at the mega firms. One thing we haven't talked about is in connection with all the merger activity that's going on, that creates opportunities for firms like mine. There are partners in those firms who have been there their entire career, but suddenly their firm is unrecognizable to them as it is, or it will be once the merger happens. And they start looking for places that are more recognizable. And the Hughes Hubbards of the world are great places to land because, again, we have fewer conflicts. We're determined to remain independent. And it's the type of place where you can come and build something. And so, but you need buy-in from your partners, which means constant communication with the partnership and with your executive committee, if in fact you want to become independent or remain independent. And I think there are going to be more of these conversations as a result of technological changes. As we talked about earlier, growing scale simply for scale is not working. And in a number of these deals that I've seen, I don't see increases in profits per partner, which is presumably why the deal was done in the first place, or one of the reasons. I just see growth in revenue. And okay, but if you're creating more conflicts as a result of that, I don't see a win in the deal. So I think people are going to have to look more carefully at that. And as a managing partner of another firm that's thinking about these issues, it's a constant communication with your partners. Partnership meetings at Hughes Hubbard sometimes are like New England town halls. People speak their minds. We're small enough that people can speak their minds. And we like it that way. I can't imagine what a partnership meeting is like at a 2,000 lawyer firm.
Yeah.
Rob, how do you decompress from both leading the enterprise and the burden of fee earning? How do you do that?
How do I decompress? Well, personally, I'm a big music fan, so I like to play music and go listen to music. And I actually write about music a little bit. A friend of mine has a publication that I write for, so that's I moonlight as a music writer when I can do that. But honestly, this job is pretty much 24/7, particularly the management piece of it. Things happen at all manner of hours. But I've grown somewhat accustomed to that in the couple of years that I've been in the managing partner job. So I find that when I'm decompressing, something comes to end my decompression.
Rob, please finish this sentence for me. The future is bright because?
The future is bright because I have a bunch of partners that are fully committed to our independent model. And so I don't have to have those conversations every day. And because of that commitment, we've got everyone pulling in the same direction on the strategic plan. And so that's one of the things I rest easy about at night. It's not that we don't have the conversation and we don't tweak the plan and we don't, continue to remind partners of it and talk about it. But I think it's bright because, I don't have internal dissent over whether we're remaining independent.
Yeah, so incredible. Rob, how can people follow you on social media?
The easiest way is I'm on LinkedIn. I post a lot. You can easily find me there.
Excellent. Rob, thank you for your time. It's been an honor and pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.